I'm 99 and a half years old, and there's something I need to tell you, while I still can. My name is Robert Calloway. Most people have called me Bob my whole life. And if you're looking at me right now thinking I'm about to give you some kind of advice, that's not what this is. I just want to tell you how it really was, because there are things I understood far too late, and it matters to me that you hear them now, while you still have time to do something different. I was born in 1926 in a small farming town in southern Indiana. Not a city, not anywhere special, just a white clapboard house at the end of a dirt road, where the smell of the place was wood smoke and cut hay and the particular damp of a basement in spring. My mother was up before first light every morning, the chickens, the stove, the children. My father was a quiet man, broad-shouldered, with hands that were rough and warm like bark on a tree. When he held my hand as a small boy, I felt like nothing in this world could reach me. There were 5 of us children. I was the third. And the first thing I remember from my childhood, not toys, there weren't many, not holidays, not anything big, but that feeling of all of us around the kitchen table on a Sunday morning, nobody in any hurry to be anywhere else. I didn't understand then that that was the greatest wealth I would ever have. Childhood ended early. Mine, like most people's of my generation, ended not when you would have wanted it to. 1932, I was 6 years old. My father lost the farm, not because he was careless or lazy, he was neither. The bank just came one morning and that was that. I remember standing in the yard watching men load things onto a truck, a rocking chair, a wooden crate, my mother's good lamp. She stood on the porch and watched without making a sound. I didn't understand what was happening, but I felt it, the way children feel things before they have words for them. Something had broken, and the pieces weren't going back together the way they were before. We moved to a cousin's house in town, 6 of us in 2 rooms. My father walked every day looking for work. Sometimes he found it, sometimes he didn't. The men in our neighborhood, good men, honest men, sat on steps in the afternoon doing nothing, not because they wanted to, but because there was nothing to do. That image stayed with me. The stillness of men who wanted to work and couldn't. The particular kind of shame that comes not from anything you did wrong, but from something the world did to you. I grew up in the silence of things nobody talked about out loud. And that stayed with me too, that habit of carrying the hardest things quietly inside yourself. School, odd jobs, the first edges of being young. It all ran together so fast, I never quite felt like I was catching up to my own life. And then came December of 1941. I was 15 when Pearl Harbor happened. My father had finally found steady work at a hardware store by then. He wasn't taken right away. He was 43 and they took the younger men first. My oldest brother James enlisted in January of 1942. He was 20. My mother packed him a bag. My father shook his hand at the front door, a long, hard handshake. And James walked down that same road he'd walked to school his whole life. Only this time, he didn't look back. I never saw him again. I turned 18 in the spring of 1944, and I was drafted. I ended up in the Pacific, on a ship off the coast of islands whose names I couldn't pronounce. I won't tell you what I saw there, because some things don't serve anyone to hear. What I'll tell you is this. I came home in 1946, 20 years old, and I was different. Not broken. I want to be careful with that word, because I wasn't broken. Just very quiet in a new way. Like something had been rearranged inside me, and I hadn't been given a manual for the new arrangement. A lot of us came home like that. You'd see it in men's eyes at the diner or at church on Sunday. This look of having been somewhere that couldn't be described to anyone who hadn't been there. We didn't talk about it. That was just how it was. You came home, you got to work, you built something. I married when I was 23. Her name was Dorothy. Everyone called her Dot. She was from a town 20 miles east, small, quick, with gray eyes that looked right at you and made you feel like you'd better be honest because she was going to see through anything else. I'd had a crush on her since I was 16, but never had the nerve to say anything. After the war, after everything, I thought, if not now, then when? If not her, then who? We were married 67 years. 67. And I want you to know, not a single one of those years was easy. We fought. We went days without really talking after bad arguments. There were nights I sat alone on the back porch in the dark and thought, is this it? Is this the whole of it? Did I choose right? And then she got sick. It was 1987. The kids were mostly grown. We'd finally paid off the house, and for the first time in our lives, we were talking about what we might do with a little bit of free time. That was the year she found the lump, breast cancer. I drove her to Indianapolis for the surgery, then to the cancer center, then back again. I slept in chairs in hospital waiting rooms. I held her hand at night and listened to her breathe, steady, unsteady, steady again. And I had only one thought in my head. Don't let that sound stop. She lived another 22 years after that diagnosis. She outlasted every prediction they made. And she went quietly, in her sleep, in her own bed, with my hand in hers. I was 89 years old. I sat beside her and I couldn't even cry. I just sat there and looked at her face, peaceful, finally completely at peace. And I thought, that's it. That was the most important part of my story. And now it's done. But I kept living. I don't entirely know why. Maybe because we don't choose when we go. We only choose how we are here while we're still here. And now, with nearly 100 years behind me, I'll be 106 months if I make it. I think about my life differently than I did when I was young. When I was young, I thought about it in big pieces: career, family, kids, house. What I had accomplished, what I had built, where I went wrong. Now I think about small things, about details, and it's in those details, that's the whole point. It's in those details where everything real was hiding. I remember one evening, Dot and I were in our mid-40s. The kids were in bed. We were sitting on the back porch, and she was peeling apples for a pie. And I was just watching her do it. The peel came off in one long curling ribbon and fell into the bowl. She wasn't talking. I wasn't talking. And then she looked up at me and smiled, just like that, no reason, no occasion. And that moment, it's still in me. Not the vacations we saved up for and almost never took. Not the money that was never quite enough. But that evening, that porch, that smile for no reason at all. I need you to actually understand that. Not just read it and nod, really understand it. Because when you're young, you believe the important things are still ahead. That real happiness is coming when you get that promotion, when you buy the house, when the kids are finally out on their own, when everything is finally settled. But it's here, right now, in the way someone looks at you over breakfast, in the smell of a morning, in the fact that you're alive and there are people nearby who love you. I spent a lot of years chasing things that didn't matter much. Not because I was a bad man. No, I tried hard. I just did what everybody does. I assumed the important things could always wait. Have a real talk with my father, the kind where you actually say what you mean, later. Call my mother more often, next week. Tell Dorothy that she was the best thing that ever happened to me. There's still time for that. There's still time. My father died in 1959. Heart attack, out in the backyard on a Saturday morning. He was 61 years old. I never said to him what I meant to say. Never had that conversation. My mother lived into her 80s, but I was busy, always busy, and I didn't get back home as often as I should have. When she died, I sat at her funeral, and all I could think about was every conversation we never had. Every visit I could have made and didn't. That weight, it never left. It sat with me for decades. Nothing sits heavier in your chest than love you had and didn't give away. I have 3 children. My oldest, Gary, is 74 now. My daughter Linda lives in Phoenix. I don't see her nearly enough. And every time she comes to visit, I look at her and think about how much I missed. Not because I meant to miss it, just because of the way I ordered my priorities. Work first, provide, protect, solve. I thought being a father meant being the person who fixed things and kept the roof over everyone's head. Turns out the main thing, the thing they actually needed, was just for me to be there, in the room, paying attention, not going anywhere. That's something I figured out too late. I also think about how many years I lived in a state of low-grade worry. How many nights I couldn't sleep over things that never happened. How many decisions I put off because I was afraid of being wrong. How many chances I passed up because I thought, not yet, I'm not ready. Let me wait a little longer. Let me be more sure. Fear steals years very quietly. You don't notice it happening. It just takes week after week, month after month, and you keep waiting for the right moment, the perfect conditions, complete certainty. But the moment is now. The conditions are never going to be perfect. And the certainty, it only comes after you take the step, never before. I was nearly 70 before I really understood. I cannot control what happens around me. I can only control how I respond to it. That is such a simple thing to know, and it took me 70 years to actually live it. There's one more thing I need to tell you. 1993. Dot was still healthy then, the kids were grown, and I had a falling out with my younger brother Ray. We fell out over money, over our mother's house after she passed, over who was owed what. Stupid, specific, forgettable money. We didn't speak for 11 years. 11 years. I was sure I was right. He was sure he was right. We were both so certain that neither one of us even tried to pick up the phone. Then he had a stroke. My niece called me and said, "Uncle Bob, Dad's in the hospital. It's bad." I drove down to Terre Haute that same afternoon. He was lying there so small in that bed. This kid brother of mine, who I used to carry on my back when he was too small to keep up. And he looked at me and said, "Bobby, what did we do that for? All those years, what did we do that for?" I had nothing to say, because there was no answer. There was no reason that justified 11 years of silence between two brothers who loved each other. Ray recovered. We got to be brothers again, real brothers, the way we were as boys. But those 11 years, nobody gives those back. They're just gone. There are people you haven't made things right with yet. Words you haven't said. Calls you've been putting off. I'm asking you, please don't keep putting them off. Not because tomorrow might be too late, though it might be, but because every day you spend without that reconciliation, without that word, without that call, is a day you spend as a smaller version of yourself. You're carrying that weight, and it's heavier than you know. I've lived a long life, longer than most, and I've watched a great many people die, some young, some in middle age, some old like me. And I noticed something that never changed. Nobody, not one person, ever lay on their deathbed and said they wished they'd loved less. The regret was always the same. Not saying it, not holding on, not forgiving, not showing up. Nobody ever grieved a missed business deal the way they grieved a missed moment with someone they loved. I don't get up much anymore. My legs don't cooperate the way they used to. My grandchildren come to visit. I have 6 and 4 great-grandchildren. Can you imagine? And I look at them and think, that's what continues. Not what I built or earned or accomplished. These faces, these eyes, where I sometimes catch a glimpse of Dot or my father or myself when I was 20 and didn't know anything. My great-granddaughter, Emma, she's 4. She climbs up onto the bed beside me and says, "Pop, Pop, tell me a story." And I tell her stories, the old ones, the ones my grandmother told me when I was small in Indiana. Stories about the land and the seasons and people doing their best. And in those moments, this is the thing I most want you to hear. In those moments, I feel such a completeness, such a quiet that goes all the way through me that I'm not afraid. I'm genuinely not afraid. I'm not afraid of dying. I was once, when I was young, especially in the Pacific, when death was a real and daily fact. I was afraid then, but not now. Now it feels like simply the next thing. I've lived my life. I've seen people come into this world, and I've seen them leave it. I watched this country go through things that would have seemed impossible to the boy who stood in that Indiana yard watching his family's belongings get loaded onto a truck. I've seen it come back from every one of them. I believe in this country. Not the flag, not the politics, but the people. Ordinary people making the best of things. We've done it before. We'll do it again. But that's not what I want to leave you with. I want to talk about you. About whoever is watching me right now and listening. You're living in a time that feels hard to you. Maybe it is hard. I won't argue with that. But listen to someone who's seen the 20th and the 21st century from the inside. Every generation thinks they got the worst of it. And every generation, if they choose to, finds a way to live, to love, and to be genuinely happy, even inside the hardest things. Happiness isn't something that happens to you when circumstances finally line up. Happiness is a decision you make every single day. The decision to notice what's good, to be grateful for what you already have, to not put off the people you love until some better, quieter time. Don't live in tomorrow. I wasted far too much of my life doing that. Always waiting for something better, something more right. Always thinking the real life was just around the next corner. But the real life was already happening, right alongside me while I was waiting. Call your parents. Not when you get around to it, now, while they're still here, while you can still hear their voices. I would give a great deal to hear my father's voice one more time. Just for 1 minute. Just to hear him say hello. Tell the people in your life what they mean to you. Don't wait for the right occasion. The occasion is always ordinary. Over coffee, in a text, on the way somewhere. The most important words get said in the most unremarkable moments. Forgive. Not for them, for yourself. Resentment is a heavy stone you carry in your pocket, thinking you're holding someone else down. You're only holding yourself. And one last thing, maybe the most important thing I can offer you after nearly 100 years. Don't be afraid to be yourself. Don't be afraid to love what you actually love. Don't be afraid to choose according to your own honest understanding of things. I've watched people live other people's lives, the lives that were expected of them, demanded of them. And at the end, they didn't even know anymore what they had actually wanted. Don't do that. Your life belongs to you. Not to your parents, not to what your neighborhood expects, not to some image you've been performing for other people's approval. Yours. And you have the right to live it the way you know in your gut is right. With kindness toward others, yes, always, but on your own terms. I've lived 99.5 years. I have seen the darkest and the brightest things a human life can hold. And if you asked me now, was it worth it? Was all that pain, all that loss, all those years you can't get back, was it worth the moments when you were loved, when you loved back, when you were simply alive and someone you cared about was in the room? It was worth it. 1,000 times over. Live well, love hard, say the things you mean, forgive the people who matter to you, and don't wait for the perfect moment, because this is it, right now. This is the moment. Thank you for listening to me.